Hello, thank you for joining me once again. Today, I want us to learn about functions. We've just finished looking at control structures, and which was nice, and I believe you got something from there. So, moving on, we are looking at functions, and the objectives of our lesson today is, as you can see, so the topic is functions, and the first objective is we want to know what exactly is a function and what is the purpose of having a function in any programming setup. The second objective is to understand the syntax for defining and calling functions in JavaScript. So we want to know how can we define a function, how can we come up with a function, and how can we use that function. And now that is the calling function aspect. That is what we're going to look at in regards to how functions can be used in any programming setup or any programming language environment. Now, the third objective is to describe the differences between function declarations and function expressions. We need to understand the difference between that. How can we declare a function, and how can we write functions expressions? So that is also important factor that we need to look at. The other thing that we are going to look at is what we call the concept of function scope and how it relates to variable. Now, when we are talking of scope, you remember when we were learning about variables, we talked of we can have local variables and global variables. Now, global variables are normally are normally variables that have been declared outside the function, but they can be used within a function. Now, the functions that have got variables declared within them, those variables are called local variable because they can only be used within that function. So that the scope in which they can be used, it is only within a function. But when we are talking of a global function, is a function, it is a variable that is declared outside a function, and it can be used in any other function that you can declare in that object or within a class, if you are looking at object oriented. So it is important we know that we cannot, the same way we have variables having their scope, we can also have functions and their scope, in which the extent to which we can use them lies behind how they've been declared and the function that we want them to do. Now, when moving on, we are going to look at how can we pass arguments, how can we pass values to the function. Then the function is able to take the value we pass to it as argument, do some calculation, and return some values to us, or some results, or some result of calculation to us, so that we are able to achieve our function. So the other thing is to understand the concept of callback function and how it is used. We are also going to look at anonymous function and explain their use cases. How are they used? How are they being used? We are also going to look at what we call the arrow function and its syntax. So that is what we are going to cover today. So today we are going to look at that, and so brace yourself, because after explaining the concept here, we are going to get down and do sample codes, just to make sure we understand what we are looking at. So to start us off, we are going to define what a function is. So functions are very important in JavaScript because they are very versatile and they are used for various purposes depending on what we want to calculate. Now, functions allow us to define a group of codes or a block of codes which we can use, and we can reuse this function. We can call this function wherever we want to perform a similar function or a similar task. We can use function once, twice, or several times. So that is the main purpose we have a function. A function is there to help you define a group of codes which you can reuse later on in your programming task or in your source code. You can define a function at the beginning of your class, but then you find that instead of redefining that function again, you don't need to do that because you can still utilize the function that you've already created. So the main purpose of having a function is so that you can reuse the codes that you defined within a function. So it helps you to use that function multiple times or many times, so they can take different inputs, then give you different outcomes, and it is very important for us to understand that aspect. So there are key aspect of a function that we need to understand. Okay, so defining a function. To define a function, we use the keyword function, or we use the keyword function to define a function. So followed by the name of the function. Now you need to know that the name of the function is also what we call the function identifier. It is what is used to identify a function. So the name of a function is what we call a function identifier. And as much as we have the rules for naming variables, we also have the rules for naming functions. But we are not going to look at that today because it is not in our objective. So our objective today is just to know how to define a function. Now, how do we define a function? Now, when you are coming up with a function, you start with the keyword function, then followed by the name of the function, then followed by parentheses in which we put or we pass the parameter therein, then followed by the curly brackets. Now within the curly brackets we have to put our codes or the group of codes we want. So when defining a function, you have to name a function, but before you give your function a name, as mine is called add numbers. So this is the name of the function. This name must come after the keyword function. So this is the keyword function followed by the name of the function, which in this context we've said it is the function identifier. Then we have this parenthesis. Within that parenthesis we have two variables. We have a variable called A and a variable called B. Now these two are what we call the arguments or the parameters. These are the arguments. Then thereafter we have the curly brackets. Then within the curly brackets, this is the opening curly bracket and this is the other one. So within the curly bracket we have to put our codes or set of commands that we want the program to execute. So we put them in here. So this is how you define a function. So it is important to note that when you are defining a function, you need to write the keyword function. So that means you cannot use the name function as the name of your function again, okay, or any other function that you'll ever come with. You cannot use the function as the name of a function or the name of a variable, because now function is a keyword. So we have the name function coming before the name of the function. So the name of the function in my case is add numbers, and I have two parameters or two arguments that are being passed to this function, and these parameters are the values that we want to use within the function. So this function is basically to calculate sum of two numbers. So the numbers are A and B. Then we get their result by adding the two. then we return a sum for that. So it is important to know that. Now we need to learn, or the second thing we need to look at is calling a function. What do you mean calling a function? So whenever you are calling a function, you want to use it. So you call a function when you want to use it. That means you can call one function several times. So calling a function means, to call a function, you simply use its name followed by the parenthesis, and then any necessary arguments that you need to be passed to the function so that those arguments are used within the function. So here is a way of calling a function. So as you can see, you have to call a function by name, and you need to pass the parameters. So these parameters are the ones that are going to be used to perform calculation within the function. So any necessary argument is passed through the function. You type them, or you put them within the brackets or within the parentheses where you had defined for them. So in this case, we are passing 2 and 3 to this function called numbers. Then we use what we call an assignment operator to assign the outcome of that function to a variable known as result. So that's how you can call a function. So you can call a function this way. You define a function here. Now you've come to a place where you want to make use of that function. Therefore, you call it in this way. Whatever you pass parameter to the function, then you equate that function to, or you assign that function to a result, so that whatever calculation is going to be performed within the function, the outcome is going to be stored in the variable result, as you can see. So that's how you can come up with a statement to call a function. So whenever you are calling a function, you want to make use of that function. You want that function to perform a certain task for you. So functions are basically meant to perform tasks. They are meant to perform tasks, and they are reusable. They can be used more than once. So the key thing is to reduce the line of codes you are going to write. So when you come up with a function that can be able to perform various tasks, so you will not go around writing lengthy codes or long lines or very many lines of code, because you will have reduced the number of lines of code because you are making use of already existing functions. So you are reusing the codes that you already defined before. Have been defined before, or the codes that have already been declared or created so that they are used. So the next thing is the function parameters. So a function has got a parameters. These parameters are the arguments. These are the variables that are passed to the function to perform any task that particular function has been defined to do. Now, function can take 0 or more parameters. A function can take 0 or more parameters, which are listed inside the parentheses after the function name. The parameters are essentially variables that will be used inside the function to represent values that are passed in what they are passed in the function to perform a certain task. So here is a simple example. We have a function with only one parameter. So this function is called square number. So as you can see, we have the keyword function, and we also have the name of the function, which is square number. Then we have the parameter, which is num. So this is this is actually the parameter. So as you can see, we've been told a function can take 0 or more parameters. So in this case, this function is taking only one parameter, and that parameter is being used there. So you take the parameter that has been passed, then you multiply and you return the result. Okay, so then this square number function is called here. Okay, so this line here is used to call the function square number. So the function square number is being called here. 4 is passed to the function as the parameter, so this 4 is what the function is going to multiply by itself to get you a square number, which is 16. So that's how this function works. So we've learned of how to define a function, and we've also learned of the how to name a function. The name of the function must be unique. I forgot to mention that it must be unique, and more so it should reflect the kind of task you are doing, so that you are able to basically make so that people can understand, or maybe you yourself can understand what each line or what each function is able to do. So in this kind of scenario, we are able to see we have a square number, which is our function, and this is the keyword function, which is being used before the name of the function. Then a parameter is being passed. That parameter is multiplied by itself within the function to give us the result. So this function square number is called right here with its name. Then a variable or a parameter is passed through it, and that variable is what the program or the function uses to perform the calculation and stores the result in the variable called result. Now we need to look at what we the function return values. Function can also return values using the return keyword. So this is the value that the function outputs when it is called. So in this case we have the return. So return is a keyword, and it is used to return the value of a function. It is used to return the result of the function. It should be used to output the outcome of a calculation for this matter. So it is imperative that we know that keyword return is basically used to output the result of a function. Okay, so that I think that is very important to know, and it is key to understand that in your function must have a name. The name must be unique, and when you are defining a function, you should start with the keyword function followed by the name of the function. Then you'll have the parenthesis. Within the parenthesis you pass the arguments. Then you'll have the curly brackets. Now within the curly brackets you write your statement or the commands that you want executed. Now one among the keywords that you'll use if your function is returning a value is your function is to output some values, is what we call return keyword. So the return keyword is used to output the result of a function. We've also learned how we can call a function. So going forward, we know what a function is, and we know how to come up with a function. And we also stated there that a function can take 0 or more arguments. So you can have a function that you are not passing any variable to it, right? You can also have a function that you are only passing one variable in it. You can have a function that you are passing more than 10 parameters to it. So functions can take 0 to many arguments when they are being used. So we also need to understand what we call as anonymous function. So in addition to named function like the ones that we've been able to look at, we can also define what we call anonymous function, which these are functions that do not have a name, and are usually assigned to a variable. So example is this. We have let square number be function num return return num times num. So this is the result. So then we call the square number here. It will still work. So this is how we define a function. So we have a function here which does not have a name, but we normally we assign that function to, we can assign that function a variable, and then we equate that function to maybe our existing function and make use of it the way it is being used in this case, or the way it is being used here. Then we also have what we call the arrow functions. Now arrow functions are shorthand way of defining function that was introduced in ES6. So they have more they are more concise syntax and automatically bind these keywords. So here is an example. So we have an example here. We have an example here of what we call an arrow function. So let square number, then you have num is equals to num plus 1. So this is what we call a square. Not the variable is, the name of the variable is square, but this is a good example of what we call an arrow function. So so as you can see, it automatically bind this keyword. So here is an example. As you can see, we have let square number equal num in brackets, then there is that arrow pointing to num times num. Okay, so let result square number. So here we are calling this arrow function to perform a task for us. So that is it. So we've talked about anonymous function, arrow functions, and we've also mentioned about the usual functions that we normally have around. So that is it. So now we've done much of talking, so we need to get down to business and actually do some practical bits of what we've been talking about. So let me just remove this so that I can start afresh. So I like fetching values from the user so that we reinforce the whole idea of knowing how to use some of these Windows object in JavaScript. So we want first of all to come up with a function. So we said whenever you are defining a function, whenever you are coming up with a function, the first thing you need to do is to write the name of the function. So I'm going to write a function here. I'm calling it some. Okay, let me just use the number that we're using, add numbers, or let me use a different example so that you are able to see what we are talking about. So let me just get let's say multiply numbers. So instead of adding, let me multiply at least some numbers. So here I'm going to have the parameters. So mine is going to take 2 parameters. Then I have the curly brackets. So in here I can have my statement. So here I'm going to have my statement. So what I'm going to do, return, right? Return x times y. Okay, so that is what I want my function to help me with. So I also need to maybe have my variable here like num. Let me do this. Let me get the variable from the user. So I do windows this window dot prompt. Wait a minute. Window dot prompt. Oh my goodness. So then so we do enter. Oh my goodness. So here we do enter the first number. Okay, enter the first number. So I'm just going to copy this there, and here I say 2. Then here I say enter the second number. So there's something I'm forgetting here, which is I can add a default value that should be displayed. So let's see. So let me just put 2 there. Then the next thing, I want to make use of this function. So I say let result equal to multiply function. Then now I pass num1 as a argument here, num2. So here I'm calling the function. Okay, so right after that I need to display the result. So I'm going to write window. I'm just going to write this to have the result being displayed in an alert interface or prompt window. Alert window. So I'm going to have my result being passed within this function. Even an alert is a function that is already existing, so it is known as a window object. So let's see whether our what we've done is working. So let's see. All right, so we can go back here. Any number. Let's say 10, and then here say 20, and click OK. You see, so I'm getting the result as 200. So this thing is working the way it should. So just to go back and get a recap of what we've done is here I've been able to declare some 2 variables. So when declaring variables, remember we use the keyword var. Then I have these 2 variables that have been declared up here. I'm prompting the users to type some numbers on the screen, and these numbers are stored inside this variable. So the first number that is typed will go inside the first variable called num1. Then the second number that is being typed will go to the second variable that is called num2. Then here I've been able to define a function. So that is the definition of a function. As you can see, I have the keyword function, I have the name of the function, multiply numbers, then I have two parameters that are being passed through the function, and those parameters are being multiplied together, and the result should be output, should be displayed. So it is we are using the return keyword to actually output that. Then here we are calling the function, and at the same time we are passing the values that we want the function to use to get the result. So, and then the output of multiply numbers function is now being stored in the variable result, and that result is what we display using this an alert message on the screen. So that's how it is done. So that's how it is done. So we've seen that you can be able to work with that. So we've even seen the parameters. We say that a function can be able to take 0 or more parameters or arguments, and a function must have a return value. In some cases they are okay, depending on what we are calculating, we can have a function returning a certain value. So the next thing that I would want to implement here is the anonymous function. That is what I want us to look at, a simple example of anonymous function. So what I'm going to do is to actually comment. Let me comment this thing, and let me just have a comment here, and then we start afresh. Okay, so this is how we work with this. So we say let square number equal to anonymous function. So we just call the function then our function will not work. There's something wrong with this. I did not put the C there. I skipped the C. Yeah, so then I'm going to have a variable called num. So this variable, I need to declare it. Remember, we are starting afresh, so I used to use the word var. So let's say var num. Okay, so then I get the parenthesis. So in this case, this anonymous function is only taking one variable or one argument, as you can see. Then we need this function or anonymous function to do some calculation for us. So we are going to do num multiplied by num. We should get some result. So the result should be returned to us. Then we need to store some results somewhere. Then we call the function square number. Remember, the anonymous function has been assigned to a variable called square number. So this by itself is a function. So we do a square number square number. So let's say num. Okay, we write a figure there. We can write any figure we want. So okay, then we move on, and at this particular moment we do window dot alert, we do result. Okay, then we save this and let's see whether it is working or we need to make some changes. So let's see, let's go back here, click OK, then we refresh this. You see, so we have got 49. So that is how you can work with anonymous function. The other function we mentioned is an arrow or arrow functions. Now arrow functions are shorthand way of defining function that it was introduced in ES6. So they have more concise syntax and automatically bind this word, this keyword. So an example is what I'm going to share with you here. Okay, so let me do this. Let me comment this work as well, and let me comment this work as well. Then we start on a new slate. So we do let square number. We're still using the same function we've used before, that identifier. So I use the square number to maximize on time. Then we have num there, so I'm going to use num, right? So then we do equal. Okay, so we have num times num, then we terminate that statement. Then we come to the result. Now let result equals to square number, then we pass a value there. This is 7. Yeah, okay, all right. So we do that square number. Then now let's do this. Let's do, let me just copy this this line from there and put it there because I want to use it now. So this is what an arrow function looks like. So as you can see, it is very particular in its structure in the way it is being used. So let's save this and see whether what we've done is working. So let's click OK, and then let's refresh this page and see. Right, so it is working. So that's how you can define functions. So we said functions are very important in any piece of programming because the functions are normally used when you are writing a complex program, and most of the time you'll find that there are those codes that you'll tend to use not once, not twice, but several times. So those codes that you will want to reuse, you group them into a function and declare them and define them and give them a name. So you declare a function, then depending on whatever you are doing with those line of codes, you give them a name. So that name you give that group of codes become the function identifier. So your function can take 0 to many parameters. So these parameters are normally written within the parentheses. Then we have the curly brackets, and there after we have the commands, or where the commands are being stated, or where the commands are defined, or where the commands are written. So with that, you can be able to reuse those commands effectively to maximize on computer memory, to maximize on time, because you don't want to repeat yourself. And in programming, we need to learn ways of minimizing use of memory so that we don't use a lot of memory. We also need not to repeat ourselves. We don't need to be redundant. We need to be efficient. And one way of writing, and one of the reason why we have function is so that we are efficient and we are able to produce whatever we are doing in the quickest time possible, and also to make sure that we are able to be precise and we are not repeating ourselves. And if we are repeating ourselves, we don't need to rewrite those code several times. We just need to write those code once and make use of them. So these functions, you can call them anytime you want to use. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for taking your time. I know it is important for you to understand this concept, so that is the reason why I always do them, to help us and help those people who are learning like myself to understand this concept. Learning is a continuous process. It never ends. It is something that will carry with us to the old age, and even wherever we'll go, we'll continue learning. So we should purpose to be a lifelong learner. We need to be constantly replenishing our memory or our minds with new ideas. And for you, thank you for taking your time, because I know you can now understand the reason why we normally have functions. Thank you. See you next time.